All right. So I know things are running late down there, but we have still a full hour for our panel. But we want to get started. So I'm Seema Basu. I'm market sector leader at Partners Innovation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to the session on Innovation Fellows Program. And what I'm going to do is, for today, just set up what the program is, give you a brief snapshot about the program, its intent, and the metrics. Then we'll go to our panelists, and they'll introduce themselves, and I think then it'll make complete sense to you why we have this panel. And what they're going to do, I'll ask a few questions so that they have an opportunity to really share, because they are all participants and stakeholders in this program. So you will hear directly from them what they think of the program and their viewpoints on it. And we'll, along the way, and otherwise open it up to questions. Carrie Mazzoni sitting here, I want to already have a big shout out to her. She is the program manager for this program, is totally on point and totally excellent at really implementing this and really making it successful. So we'll be happy to answer anything that's not in this overview and oversight in terms of tactical, how it works, anything. So we have plenty of time. I want you to ask questions as we take breaks and at the end. You can ask questions two ways. You can use the app and put it through there, and Carrie has the iPad and she'll see the question. Or we're a small group. We like to really hear your viewpoints, would like you to speak up. If you don't need a microphone, just ask your question. Okay? So what is the Innovation Fellows Program? And Harry and Paul will talk a little more from the institutional leadership perspective, but I just want to tell you that this is something we're building on, where we had one-off experiences where we knew, if you think of our mission of patient care, research, and education, how do we think of people, talent, education, workforce development that really fits in our mission? And how do we think of it in collaboration with our industry counterparts? And so with that, we wanted to build on some few successful one-off department programs we had to really scale this to become a program. And we kicked it off at a more across partners, all the partners hospitals, in 2017. The program is really, in its essence, a secondment of either partners faculty to our industry hosts, which we call the outbound, now very creative, and the other way around, where we have industry employees could come into any of the hospitals and partners, and that we call, from our perspective, inbound. What you'll hear today on this panel is a lot about outbound, because that's where we started. 2019 is Carrie and my year to really kickstart the inbound in a much more scalable fashion. And we would love to get your input as you hear this. What do you think about it? Our goal with this program is it will evolve, and it'll evolve for each partner with industry hosts, because our industry hosts, at this point, if I were to give you a snapshot, we have 10 industry partners in this program. And they are large pharma, device companies, small startups, VC firms, and we see this applicable to any industry segment within the healthcare, payors, consulting firms. So we're trying to engage with all of them as we think in terms of workforce, what is the next generation of healthcare leaders need in terms of adjacencies and exploring how they can grow their skills and career opportunities. And the essence of the program is short-term secondment either way. We have, to date, building on our historical, 25 fellows, out of which 10 are currently active at the different host sites. And of the ones, the alumni that we call them, we've had those, about 50-50, that have stayed at industry, and those that have chosen to build careers in industry, not necessarily at the same host site, and those that have come back into academia and continue to work within the partners system. So with that kind of an overview, I'm going to turn over and ask first round all of our panelists to introduce themselves, their organization, and you'll see how they fit into this program. And then we'll kick off with some questions. So Lori, can we start with you?
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Lori Braun. I am one of the Innovation Fellows. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist at Mass General, and I'm also a Clinical Innovation Fellow at Boston Pharmaceuticals.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Peter Howe. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Boston Pharmaceuticals. My original training is in pediatric hematology, oncology, and we're obviously very involved in the program.
Good afternoon, I'm Harry Orff. I'm the Senior Vice President for Research at Mass General and a Principal Associate in Genetics at the medical school. I began life as an organic chemist, but don't hold that against me.
So I'm Nathalie Agar. I'm an Associate Professor of Neurosurgery and of Radiology, and I also started off as a chemist. And I'm a Principal Investigator at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and I'm one of the four or five partners, mentors of in the program.
Hello, I'm Paul Anderson. I'm a rheumatologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital. I'm also a laboratory investigator, and I serve as the Chief Academic Officer, which means that I support research and education at our hospital.
David Fagan. I'm the Chief Digital Health Officer for Boston Scientific. Many of you, let me maybe explain what the heck that means. So I'm the guy that keeps the robots healthy. I know. So basically what we call digital health is the application of information technology, whether it's social, mobile, AI, VR, AR, to patient, physician, and health system facing solutions.
I'm David Chang, or David number 2. So I am currently a postdoc research fellow in Callum McRae's lab at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And I am also an innovation fellow at Boston Scientific. So you'll hear more about that later.
Okay, so did that make sense now why our panelists and how they're going to share with you some exactly how they participated in the program and their viewpoints. So we'll start with Harry and Paul. If I can have you give your perspective as leadership for the 2 hospitals, why the importance of this program, where we see it fit our mission.
Well, certainly it's consistent with our mission to educate. But if we're going to move the needle on healthcare forward, we have to understand that discovery simply isn't enough. We're engaged in that in fundamental research and to some extent translational research at our academic medical centers. But if we really want to impact healthcare, we've got to complete that cycle and reach out to get something in. We either have to develop a product or a diagnostic or a new device. And the only way we can do that is to strengthen our ties with the people who actually make those devices, make those therapeutics, and develop those diagnostics. So it's a natural continuum of giving our people exposure, not just to discovery science, but to translate that into something that can have an impact. And this program helps give that perspective to a lot of our bright young scientists who really have only seen sort of one side of the equation, the research side, and not really the development side.
I totally agree, Harry. You know, we have really smart fellows at the Brigham and the MGH, and before this program even existed, they would come to us and say, wait a minute, there's all these fellows and there's only this many professorship positions. What am I going to be doing? Meanwhile, across the river in Kendall Square, there was this tremendous activity going on, which was incredibly exciting. If you sat down in a cafe in Kendall Square, you sort of heard about people starting companies and developing drugs, and it was just incredibly exciting. And our fellows wanted something like this. And so we sort of got together with our Partners Innovation colleagues and said, we need to do something here because our fellows are asking for it. You know, I think that this is, as Harry said, part of our educational mission. We want to help all of our trainees do the best that they can do in whatever area that is. If they go into academia, that's great. If they go into industry, that's great. If they go into venture capital, that's fantastic. And that just delivers the partners diaspora throughout the country, and it's great, we think, for everybody.
So, and that really both have spoken to really what was the outbound and is the outbound program. So this is our year for really starting to think about how and what works well for inbound. And how do you view inbound? Do you have thoughts on the inbound? that would help the audience and understand how we're thinking about the inbound, what might be a good fit, value?
You know, we're an academic medical center. We're very interested in developing the next generation of therapies for our patients. And we realize that there are certain things that we're very good at in academia, but there's other things that our industry partners are extremely good at and things that we can't do. I think the amount of money that our industry partners have invested in R&D actually has gone down over the years. And right now, most companies invest less than 10% of their R&D. And I think what they're more and more trying to do is take advantage of what's being done on the academic side for the very fundamental basic science piece, and realizing that they are really playing a special role at translating those basic discoveries into new therapies, and then really developing that into a medicine that can actually help people. So we are very interested in pushing academic industry collaboration and cooperation. And we feel that any interaction we can have between the academic side and the industry side is extremely valuable. There used to be a time when industry was described as the dark side, and we didn't want to go over there, and it was sort of this mysterious place. But in fact, everybody on academic side, industry side are very smart people trying to do amazing things. And the more we can sort of get together and work together on a day-to-day basis, the more we can realize that we can do things together in a very effective way. So we would love to have even senior people from industry come and spend a year on a sabbatical or secondment in a laboratory in an area that they're interested in and work together with us. We're also developing new programs where we actually insert large groups of scientists from a company into our academic laboratory and partner with academic investigators in a way which everybody is completely equal. So this is sort of a new way of looking at interaction between academia and industry, which I think is going to be a way of the future. I think this is going to grow. So we're very excited about that.
I would agree from the inbound perspective. I think there's a technical aspect, a technical expertise that comes into our academic medical centers that in many laboratories isn't there. And if you think of architects and builders, the architects love to design. Theoretically, it looks beautiful on paper, but the builders actually have to make it work. They actually have to get something across the finish line. And it's somehow that practical knowledge and expertise and grappling with the day-to-day problems of actually making something work, that type of knowledge base, having that brought back into the academic medical centers so that our young scientists can see that side of it, I think strengthens the bond. And also, relationships. You could say that Mass General or Brigham has a relationship with company X or Y, but in point of fact, those relationships all start out as one person to another person. It's a human connection that makes it. And what we're trying to do here is build a basis for those human connections to have a more natural course and to integrate into each other's operations in a way other than I just happen to know Joe, at company X.
Great. So, so if I were to say what you really have heard from Paul and Harry is how at a partners level we think about open innovation. How many of you here have read Henry Chesbrough's book on open innovation, right? So if he's thinking about how do you create purposeful inflow and outflow of knowledge to be able to maximize value and create value, is exactly what we're trying to do through this program. Right? And it's adjacent to sometimes we'll have research collaborations with, in fact, most of our strategic partners, like with Boston Scientific, we might have research collaborations as distinct and separate from the fellows program. So we are building lots of, as Harry put it, channels to kind of lower the barrier so people can do this, do it where it's thoughtful, meaningful for both partners, the individual fellows who we're really thinking as future healthcare leaders. Right? And so we're thinking cooperatively, co-mentoring, co-training for the next generation. So now I'll turn and really ask Nat. So Nat's role, we have 5 program mentors. And as a program mentor, we wanted to do this, but we, as Paul and Harry said, education is, we're an academic institution. We want to make sure as our fellows are stepping out in this, which is not something that's done at scale. It's not something that's normal. We want to make sure they have a mentor within our system who can check in with them. What are they learning? Is it working for them? What are their questions from a career and skills development perspective? And so I'll let Nat talk a little more about how she views her role, what her experience has been so far in being a mentor to the fellows and helping Carrie, myself, and the program evolve and have conversations with our industry counterparts to really make it a robust program that is a win-win for everybody.
So I like to say that I think I have by far my favorite role in this whole program is I get to interact with the fellows one-on-one. I like to build that personal relationship, and it's well said that it's a human aspect that we need to bring innovation. So even though I'm affiliated with partners, I play a very neutral role, so I don't have that push and pull as if the fellow decides that they want to end up staying in industry. It does not take a toll on my own research program. So I like to get to know the fellows one-on-one. We build that relationship so that if there are hurdles that come along the way or big successes, I love to hear those as well, that they feel comfortable discussing. And I think having multiple mentors is something that I strongly advocate for. So I don't think there's one mentor that can do absolutely everything for you. So I like to play that role that is more a sounding board as to career advice, and not so much advice, but just help you sort through your thoughts as you're trying to identify the best career that you can possibly have.
Yeah, and so my daughter is going to college, and I went with her to Ohio State to visit, and she's in the honors program. So think of this as like an honors program. You get more mentors, you get institutional leadership. As a fellow, we're really trying to enrich the experience for the fellow. Mm-hmm. There are cohorts that are early in developing what we're thinking as the new generation, new way of working between industry and academia. So in that, is very critical in playing that role where they feel supported, have somebody who is, as she said, a sounding board. Also, Nat, maybe you can talk about how you've helped some of them realize that part of this is also networking and also understanding more adjacencies and introductions to people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really what it is to end up building a network and sometimes to identify who to go talk to, and to also, I would say, to a certain level, that's more at the ground level, is to help build the fellows' confidence in building this network. As if you've been trained in the lab, it's not very typical that you'd want to go out and be building this kind of network, but to encourage that.
Great. So we're going to move on from listening from the partner side to listening to our industry hosts and the fellows. Before I do that, is there a burning question on what you heard, or shall we move on and then at the end ask questions? Move on? You have two?
Questions, but
okay.
I don't know if you want to answer them now, or one is, what are the requirements you need to fulfill if you want to be part of this program?
Yeah, and the second one?
The other is, what percentage of outbound fellows return at postdoctoral and faculty levels, respectively?
So let's take how the program works at the end after listening to our panelists. Carrie and I can answer both of those. So maybe we'll start with Peter. Peter, so you've had a couple fellows now at Boston Pharma from our program, and we would love to hear what it was when it started, where it is for you, and your insights, your perspective on the program as a host.
Sure, thank you, Seema. So indeed, we have had two fellows thus far, Lori being the second, and we're delighted that Lori has signed up to do another year with us, and we'll also be taking on a third fellow at the next academic year as well. So for us, we think of the benefits for the fellow, for us as a company, and then industry in general. I think from the fellow's perspective, what we try to do is really leverage the synergies, the broad synergies that are there. and provide a setting in which fellows can experience what we do in industry, both at a high level and also deep in the weeds. So, for example, I don't think it's necessarily straightforward that someone who has experience in the laboratory, as fellows do, and as well experience in a clinical setting, can basically pull out bits and pieces and understand what comes in the middle in terms of that translational medicine aspect of that is inherent in drug discovery and drug development. Like anything else, different therapeutic areas, it's a discipline. And one has to learn what goes on there. So there's a certain philosophy, if you will, about how to develop a drug. There's certain practices that are more typical than not in terms of how to develop a drug. And this kind of fellowship allows a fellow to experience that and have that understanding. And as well, hopefully, we can also provide them the more procedural, if you will, aspects of how to look at a new target from an industry perspective, right? Is this a druggable target, and then what can be done with it? What's involved in identifying a lead compound and then pushing that forward? How to do the IND-enabling studies, or what's involved in the IND-enabling studies that have to be done before a drug goes into the clinic, and then obviously the phase 1, 2, and 3 experience or aspects thereof that are involved in putting together a development plan and running the studies to see it. Now, we all know drug development is a very long process, right? We've heard things in the popular press, it takes 10 years to develop a drug. So in that regard, right, a fellow being in the program for a year can't experience all of it, but being in a setting where there are a number of different projects at different stages, one can try to expose a fellow to as much of that progress through different projects, so that they can have the full breadth of the experience. So I think for us, that's what we try to offer the fellows. From a company perspective, Boston Pharma, despite the big sounding name, is not. They're only about 40 full-time employees in the company, and we have a bit of a different model. We don't focus in on one specific therapeutic area, so we call it therapeutic area agnostic. Well, with 40 people, there's no way you're going to have that clinical experience and expertise to take care of everything that one needs to potentially do, and that's where the fellow program benefits us, because we bring in folks who are early in their training, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, all that, but also they have the clinical exposure in areas that we may not have in a company. And likewise, being where they are closer to being the more generalist practitioners that all of us, who are a little long in the tooth are no longer. And so that's also very helpful when we are looking at different projects going into different diseases and different therapeutic areas for which there's no internal expertise. And then I'd say the last thing with respect to the industry is, you've heard about the collaboration that's involved. Absolutely, right? No one person, no one entity develops a drug. It involves lots of people working together. And to the extent that through this program, which I think is terrifically innovative, because you can't find many of these anyplace else, offers trainees and post-trainees, young faculty, if you will, in an academic setting, exposure to what goes on in industry. I think it seeds the industry for experts, as well as folks who may not choose to spend their lifetime doing it, but may want to spend a little bit of their academic careers as well being involved in what we do in industry. So let me just stop there.
That was great. So maybe Lori, maybe you want to give your perspective as a fellow who's spent a year with Peter.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll just say a little bit about myself and my background and what motivated me to pursue this fellowship. So I'm originally from the New York area, and I did my medical school training and pediatric residency training at Mount Sinai, New York. And then I came to Boston to pursue subspecialty training in pediatric endocrinology. And as part of my subspecialty training, I had the very fortunate opportunity to lead a clinical trial along with my great mentors, Dr. Steve Grinspoon and Dr. Takara Stanley. I led a trial studying the effects of statin medication on insulin sensitivity and liver fat. And through this experience, I learned a tremendous amount about really two domains. The first domain being what are the clinical and scientific questions, and what are the tools, diagnostic resources, and methods that we need to answer these questions. And the second domain really was the operational aspects of running a successful clinical trial, and both from the sort of 30,000-foot view perspective of designing a trial to also the in-the-weeds perspective of the day-to-day regulatory aspects and how to recruit patients, effective recruitment strategies. And I learned a tremendous amount from this experience, and as this trial was wrapping up, I was also completing my clinical training in pediatric endocrinology, and I really just wanted to learn more about early phase drug development. So how does something go from a molecule in the lab to a new therapeutic that's going to help a patient in the clinic? And then I learned about this innovation fellowship at Boston Pharma, and really this seemed like the ideal fit because it allowed me the opportunity to learn more about early phase drug development, to work with an amazing team of mentors, really a multidisciplinary team, as Peter mentioned, because it's a small company. Everyone brings their own expertise, from business development folks to toxicologists, pharmacologists, and everyone really has a vast amount of experience in industry. And I'm able to work with this great team, learn from them. And in addition, I'm able to maintain my clinical role as a pediatric endocrinologist at Mass General, so I can continue to see patients on a part-time basis. And I really do enjoy and value my relationship with patients. I think I also am able to provide unique perspective and insight to the team at Boston Pharma because I am maintaining my clinical role. So what motivated me to continue for a second year is really, I feel like I've learned so much so far, and I feel that I still have a ton to learn. I'm involved in several projects, and some of them are just about to hit the clinic, and I really feel that by staying longer, I can see a project through from start to finish.
Great. So before I turn to the two Davids, I just want to say one of the things when our institutional leadership asked us to create a program to make this operationalize it, one of the biggest things is we took elements of design thinking and said, if you really want to create access to the different industry partners, from a device to a virtual pharma to, we have Sanofi as a partner, to Third Rock, to how do we create few fixed elements, more flexible elements, stay true to the intent of the program, but make it where it works for all the different type of partners, and reflects all the different departments and fellows we'd have, from PhDs to MDs to MD PhDs to people who have finished their clinical fellowship, those that have done clinical trials, those that are fundamental molecular biologists. How do we, and that was really what you'll hear, the program can span all the different kind of industry, different kind of smart young people that we have that can place to this program. And we're, like I said, focusing on outbound, but what we want to achieve in this year is the same for inbound, the same flexibility, the same breadth. So from Boston Pharma, we'll turn it over to David Fagan to talk about as a host as Boston Scientific.
Yeah, it's great. No, thank you. I'm obviously a fan of the program, and outbound for partners is actually inbound for us because that's great. We have a real critical capability and knowledge and insight gap that David is currently filling. And I think the operative word here really is synergy, right? There's just such complementary skill sets with really top talent that's very exciting. So let me give you a little bit of a sense of the program within my vertical. Although we're a big company, you can imagine many fellows across the company. But my responsibility is to drive digital health across the enterprise. What does that mean? Well, that means we're really trying to get beyond the device and create value for, as I said, for patients, for their caregivers, for physicians, for health systems. But we have a real gap. And the gap is really that we don't understand the modern context of care, right? Why would we? We make devices. But that understanding is so critically important when you're trying to develop, applications or AI or other social media or VR or AR within the clinical setting. And we even have a program internally we call Digital Health Pathways that tries to educate our own folks on what does modern care delivery look like. What are the workflows? How do you make decisions? What's the data? What's the care team look like? How do you get paid? Why do you get up in the morning? What do you do at night, right? All those things are real gaps. And having somebody come in who lives that every day and understands that world is incredibly enabling. And it's not so much about the amount of time David spends with the team, but it's those critical few insights. And those insights can save us weeks or even months of development, right? Because when you don't know, you might go down the wrong path. And especially in digital, where we talk about very rapid iterative cycles and rapid learning, right? So we need those insights very quickly, and the Fellows Program really helps us get those insights quickly. Otherwise, we'd have to do months of research to figure out, well, what does that actually look like? And here, with one word or David saying, yeah, physicians won't like that. That's not, we might take a completely different direction, right? So on almost a bi-weekly basis, he can impact that trajectory. And again, I'll let David speak for the benefits, but I hope, it's helpful, especially in the context of digital, which is very different from pharma, right? You will actually see a small sliver, but of the entire development process, from idea to development to commercialization. And I think that kind of iteration, again, not just helpful for us, but hopefully helpful for David as well.
Great. David, you want to chime in?
Sure. So a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Taiwan and then moved to Canada and did my undergraduate studies at the University of British Columbia, and that's where I fell in love with basic research and translational research. And then I did my MD PhD training at Baylor College of Medicine, which we just found out that Peter's son is also there. And so that was a trek of 8.5 years, with the whole program. And then I did a short postdoc in Europe as part of the European Society of Cardiology. And then shortly after that, came to Boston and did my internal medicine internship and residency. And so throughout this whole time, I have to say, like Paul was saying, the industry was the dark side, right? And sorry, David.
You should hear what we call you guys.
The bright side.
Yeah.
Look at the lens.
Customers.
So it's I call it kind of the hidden curriculum, right? That if you come out and tell your mentor, your advisor, that hey, I want to check out this opportunity in industry, and they will ask you, what's wrong? Is everything okay? are you not research is not working out? And there's really just no formal pathway or training opportunities within this whole period of time. I think that's changing, but still, the majority is that there's very little space or even time within this training pathway. And so when I got to Boston, and Boston is just booming with these types of interactions, and in the residency program itself, Brigham, I think, especially for the internal medicine residency, there's a real emphasis in, kind of following non-traditional pathways. So the leadership, Joe Katz, is very, very supportive, and of course all the way up the partner leadership, very, very supportive of us exploring and looking beyond kind of the traditional model. So a couple residents, co-residents and I, we started looking, we started talking to VC companies, we look into pharma, and I even did a short VC fellowship with Vida, which I kind of had to set up myself, but the leadership was completely supportive of that. And then we also, at the same time, we have these role models, right? People who have very successful basic research careers, but who learn to partner with industry. And as a result, they're able to push discoveries to the patients. And ultimately, that's our goal, right? It's not how you do it, it's how can you get there faster, more efficient, and less costly. So I was finishing my residency, and I was joining the lab of Dr. McCrae, again, to do more basic and translational research. But I expressed to him that I have the desire to use my time to explore industry. And he was more than supportive. He's actually the vice chair of scientific innovation here. And so he recommended that I consider this Innovation Fellows program. And I think around the same time, Boston Scientific approached partners. I think they were trying to find a fellow. So there was a mutual interest. And my research interest is in electrophysiology, cardiac electrophysiology. So it kind of fits well with kind of the cardiovascular areas in Boston Scientific. So when I first heard about kind of this program, and I just want to say one thing to the leadership is that I think this program is wonderful, but I just think it needs to be advertised more, because it took a while to find out even that there is such a program. And I talked to a lot of my co-residents, and they don't know. They've never heard about it.
Just because you always trash the emails instead of send it to you.
So I think there'll be a lot. I think there's a lot of interest at the trainee level for this type of experiences. So anyway, at first, talking to Dave Vagan, I realized that I was going to be part of the digital health group, which is kind of developing apps. And I have zero background in anything related to that. So I was a little bit kind of hesitant. But then after talking to him and after thinking it over and talking to the different mentors, I realized that this is actually a very rare and wonderful opportunity. Because what I can get out of this experience is that not only am I part of Boston Scientific, which is a device giant, huge company, but I get to be a part of this innovative group, Digital Health, which is basically like a startup within this device giant. So I get to learn kind of the startup culture, but at the same time, I get to see how corporate, business side of things, and how sometimes there could be challenges, right, for both sides. And so we worked out an agreement, and this is to what Seema was saying, that the program is designed to be flexible, because I still want to mainly focus on my research, chasing the grant dream, this and that. But I want to have a role in exploring the industry. So we worked out an 80-20% setup, and the program was more than the program was more than willing to accommodate that. And so I'm able to, I think, get the best of both worlds, frankly. So it's been a tremendously rewarding experience. So as soon as I joined the team, David gave me a couple of books, including Competing Against Luck, Lean Startup, and these are, startup books, and I've never heard of them, right? In the academic, just never even hear about them. And I learned about these concepts of, being agile, how do you think like an entrepreneur, right? And so it's immensely eye-opening for me just to get that. And then on a day-to-day basis, or weekly or bi-weekly basis, I get to interact with a small team where they have very quick cycles of iteration. And I get to see how they implement the principles of running a startup in a real way. And because the product cycle is short, I get to kind of see iterations of it, see how products can go from an idea all the way to product. In fact, they're launching, I think, what's the date? I think next week, right? There's the first product launch and then there will be more coming up. So I think overall, maybe I've spoken too much, but overall it's been a tremendous experience for me, and I really like to thank Seema, Carrie, the leadership for making this possible. And I think we just need to get the word out, get more people involved.
Thank you. So I'm hoping that shows you how two different companies, two different models, agile group within a large company can avail of this program, and it really be something that is enriching for everybody involved, right? So that's, and really I really like that the program can afford to have this flexibility, and that's all Carrie and I look for in terms of matching our partners and our fellows, that each can get what they need out of it, and that's partly the role we play in trying to find and identify candidates for whom that's the right fit, okay? So at this point, I'll maybe answer the question that was on eligibility, right? A lot more. Okay. So we'll start with the eligibility. So we, again, like I said, fewer fixed elements. We're trying to stray true through the intent. If it should be a research collaboration, it should be research collaboration. If it's about IP and licensing, it should be IP and licensing. Our office does all of it, right? So we try to make sure the intent is right, then we can be as flexible as everybody's needs are. So the eligibility from our end, thinking of who we are as a system, we want to be entrepreneurial, we want to be innovative, but we don't need to disrupt our operations and things where when you're a clinical candidate, you have to go. When is the right time to do that? Our academic leadership definitely felt it had to be post-resident at minimum. You have to have completed your residency if you're an MD. If you're a postdoc, we wanted you to at least have had a couple years of postdoc experience within partners. So that's our eligibility criteria for our partners, faculty and fellows to be part of the program. It's not a law, but these were the guidelines that we built with our leadership. After that, there are certain things that come into play, like those that are in clinical fellowship. There's an ACGME guideline. There's a lot of conflict of interest guidelines, and it's also very disruptive to the amount of time they have to spend in clinical fellowship. So it can be concurrent with the clinical fellowship year. So we have certain eligibility criteria, certain compliance criteria, and Carrie, and when Boston Pharma or Boston Scientific comes to us with a particular project, it's not a job, it's something where we will roll up our sleeves, our fellows, and contribute, but it is supposed to be a learning two-way experience. So they are very flexible typically about thinking how much time. There's a criticality. If a project can't move and they do need some impact, so then we go back and look at our, communicate with our leadership. They help us get the word out, and we will have to figure out better ways of getting the word out to try and identify a few candidates for whom it's the right time in their life, in their career, post clinical trials wrapping up, where there is enough of a lead time and the right time to be able to do this. Carrie has lots of conversations with potential interested candidates. We try to distill it to a couple, and then they go interview with the hosts, right? And then take it from there. So I hope that answered the eligibility question. And from a partner selection, what we're looking for in a partner is that we want our fellows to contribute, but we're looking for them to provide. We're not very prescriptive because we're going to different companies, from VC firms to pharma companies. So we are not prescriptive in exactly what the project looks like, exactly how much mentorship there is. So is the supervisor and mentor the same person? But we want to have that discussion to make sure everybody's on the same page and provides it in what makes sense for that project, that company, that fellow. And then from our end, we provide mentors for sure. Okay? What was another question, Carrie?
We have a few on IP, but before we get there, because that'll be a little bit more detailed, how is the program funded?
Okay, so that goes back to, so we're an academic institution, and while we could create a lot of flexibility in the program, we don't have a lot of flexible money for this program. So the way it works is our industry partners reimburse the hospital, the department, for the amount of time that the fellow is seconding. So if it is 20%, we try to make it seamless to our fellow because this is short term. We want it to be least disruptive. So the insurance, everything stays the same because they continue to be an employee of MGH or Brigham. And the way Kerry has set it up, the industry host just reimburses us, and it goes, their paycheck sees no disruption.
Can I jump
Yeah,
in?
yeah.
Because I think the value is incredible here, right? Because as we pay, and again, we're happy to pay, what we get is 20 years of academic education and insight in that time frame, right? David isn't kind of sitting and running the project day to day. That's not why he's there, right? He's there obviously to learn and to help and contribute tangibly, but he's there to contribute his insights. And if we can get his best insights on a part-time and pay for the part-time, that's just a huge win for us.
Agreed, and that's how we see it too. We don't think it's expensive. We don't, and we didn't want to create barriers to this. And so that's, and we're very transparent. We try to follow the same way we do salaries, NIH guidelines, and depends on what level. So it may cost more if the person that who's going into the program is in the later part of their career. So, but we're very transparent. It is really reimbursement of what is their salary back to the department and the institution, and they continue to be our employee. And we'll go through the questions, but if something's not clear, Kerry and I will also stay afterwards. We're happy to answer that. Another one, Kerry?
IP. What's the separation? How do you keep industry and academia separate in this program?
Okay, and I'm sorry to be doing a lot of the talking. So obviously, I'm in the Office of Innovation. I deal with intellectual property every day. So in this, we are very clear as versus research collaboration or when we license our IP to our industry partners for commercialization. In this program, in the secondment part, so the project that David's doing at Boston Scientific or Laurie's doing at Boston Pharma, partners, MGH, Brigham doesn't own the IP. That IP stays with the industry host. It's under the direction and it's for the project for the industry host. Again, not prescriptive because each industry and each project might be different. We do upfront have discussions that if anything is publishable, it's certainly for our fellows who are still straddling academia, industry, career paths, publication is hugely important to us. So in as much as our mentors can, not necessarily legally and transactionally, but can encourage and contribute to publications, we'd like that to happen. But in terms of intellectual property, in the outbound, the project, it stays with the industry host. Kerry and I, part of our job then also becomes to make sure we have very robust conversations up front with our candidate fellows to make sure there's no overlap, because we don't want to get in an IP mess. So what they're doing in their flexible time at the institution and what they're doing at the project, we call it the fellows project at the industry, that there's a separation in the project. And that just makes sure they're learning something that's adjacent, they're different, but at the same time, there's no inadvertent IP that we can't decide who owns what. So that's part of the, when we're looking at eligibility and right fit, kind of the conversation that we have.
And could I,
Yeah, sure.
How the program is run is actually quite consistent with how we do things internally, within a company. And I think David would support that as well. So, within a company, if I or one of my colleagues comes up with some brilliant idea that is the source of a patent, that patent actually stays with the company. So it's really the same thing as what you're doing.
Absolutely, and it's just like standard consultants. Yeah, you hire experts, they come in, they get paid, but the IP stays with the company.
And can I say something?
Yeah,
As a
no,
partner's
please.
mentor, I'm really neutral into this. I don't have discussions with the fellows about what is going on in the company in terms of the specifics, so I'm not a secret agent trying to pull out IP from industry. So that's something that we make clear at the very beginning.
That's a really good point, because we want to say we're very sensitive, when we're working with and understanding. Did you have a question?
Yes. So you talked about outbound, how you deal with IP. How about the inbound side? Because you're not pushing that more, and then obviously the more challenging question.
Yeah, so again, I'll take a shot at it, and anybody on this panel can add. So with inbound, the idea is that in inbound we have, like I said, we're still kickstarting it. We have at the concept level, we might work with those companies that already have their own postdoc programs. That maybe they want to send some of their, who are the actual trainees, maybe into academic labs for a little bit to learn maybe cutting edge techniques, maybe learn how to make induced pluripotent stem cells, work in a stellar scientific lab. So that is one kind of avenue we're pursuing. The others, as Paul had mentioned, could be seasoned industry folks coming, because if you're thinking about what is keeping them ticking, maybe they want to learn something different, want to come back to academia for some early stage science. So what we do there is, to the concept level, is that if you come in here, work here, reverse. It's our project. The IP will belong just like it would in that lab to MGH or Brigham. And the only difference being that, again, we try to make sure that the project that they're working on, and what we call the Fellows Project Reverse, is one where in that lab or in that center is not being funded by, and we'll vary it. If it's in a lab, we want to be very clear where there's more discovery science happening, that it is not funded by another industry sponsor or somewhere where there'd be obligations. And we would give the industry host, who is employee that postdoc or the staff member is, the option to license that. So it's a very simple option. If there's any intellectual property, the industry host will have a right to license it. And that's where, because again, the philosophy there being, and we've discussed this with Paul and Harry, that when there's IP generated in an academic lab, when IP is to be used to justify investment for commercialization, we don't do that. We still go to industry partners. So the fellow, if they came from a certain company, we would give that company the first right to license that IP to commercialize if they so want. And if they don't want it, then we can, partner it elsewhere. So that's how, did that answer your question? Any other questions on IP?
Not on IP.
So it's a sensitive one, and we gave it some thought, and our office has a lot of experience on IP. I think we do about 200 plus sponsored research agreements and collaborations every year, 200 plus license agreements for intellectual property. So we understand, and we're good at being able to draw some barriers and educate everybody involved in how to deal with it.
We have a question again about what's the percentage of outbound fellows that return to postdoctoral and faculty levels respectively? And I think we addressed this a little bit. If I can
Yes,
say,
please do.
Of the 25 fellows that we have, some are active, some are not. So about 15 are, we call alumni. And I would say about a third of those have moved into industry. Of course, people change, but immediately back into academia, just about 2/3 have come back to the hospital or gone to another hospital or academic, but about a third roughly have stayed in some industry. If that answers whose ever question. Next one, this is interesting, maybe based on David's discussion. Why is the program, in the sense of employer branding, not mentioned on the homepage of Boston Pharmaceutical? You are picked on that one. I just want to say one thing before. So we're working on branding. You might imagine that there's a lot of issues with putting the hospital names out there, so we have to be very careful on our end. We have not discussed this. We've discussed it a little bit about putting all of our industry hosts on our page. We have not talked yet to our industry hosts about that, so I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
We actually talked about that and decided that we wouldn't put it on our page because the Innovation Fellows program is really run out of MGH and partners. Obviously, we are beneficiaries of having the fellows, but we didn't want to be stealing your thunder, essentially.
So I think to address what David said and maybe this question, yeah, we're working on how to get the word out better. It's a huge system, and because the program is available to our employees, email seems the easiest way to get out there, but as the joke was, another email. So we're working on that. So thanks. If anyone has any ideas, let us know.
Let me just add
Yeah.
a point. At MGH, we've tried to step back and say how this program is one facet of a strategy that we're starting to employ over the last couple of years of how we can get our faculty and our postdocs and our researchers to begin to think more translationally about what the impact of their work can be. You have to write that purpose down when you fill out a grant application, but then you kind of forget about it. You just go about and do your thing. But the bottom line is that if we feel that it would benefit our entire research program if we can get our people understanding the entire flow. So to that end, we've started we've started training courses that we have faculty from the venture community and from local pharmaceutical and biotech teaching our young faculty and postdocs and even our clinicians how actually something goes from discovery all the way through to a product or a diagnostic or a device. And that's actually a 20-week-long course where we're taking people who have this interest, and maybe it's 30 or 40 of them at a time, but we're trying to get them to begin to think differently about the other side of research. Where does it go once you make those discoveries? So this, I think the fellows program here is a real manifestation of that outcome. But we'd like to take a step back, at least at our academic medical centers, and see how can we begin to get that way of thinking into the heads of all of our fundamental researchers.
And that's really important point Harry's making. This is a continuum, and this, we have different programs that fit different people at different times. Some are internal, external. We want to do it with our partners and think about capabilities that exist in both to be able to co-train, co-mentor. We also, and we're open to any of you who have ideas. Carrie's trying to create a proper toolbox of educational material that might be helpful for fellows as they go through, like books. We'd love to have a list of books that...
Yeah, can we get those books? That's one thing I meant to ask.
So for example, I would say Eli Lilly has an online drug development module, and they donated it, again, because we live in a regulated vendor healthcare system, but because we have a program, they could actually donate their online educational module to the program, and we give it to fellows. Again, it's online. They can, we're very thoughtful about their time constraints, but this allows them, especially in it's a drug development one, to do it on their own time. So we are trying to create educational resources, or didactic, interpersonal, so that we really, exactly what you're hearing at this conference today, a lot of things are going to have to come together for real healthcare transformation. The next generation is going to do that. How do you go deep and then still get your adjacencies? Really, that's what we're trying to achieve. And as Harry said, we're trying many different ways, and they're all built on each other.
Okay, I think we have two more.
Okay.
Are there plans to expand the Innovation Fellow program beyond MDs and PhDs, research role groups, and open it up to other disciplines across partners?
So I suppose we haven't discussed it. That was our constituents that, we had the biggest need for, but there's nothing in the program that precludes that. It was just where the initial prioritization effort and what we thought was also good fits and value proposition for our industry partners. But I don't think there's anything so if anybody has an idea or wants to, definitely bring it up. Our steering committees, Harry, Paul, Chris Coburn, and Ann Klebanski. And so Carrie and I take any new idea or concept that can fall under this umbrella. And we do have a few variations of this under this umbrella. We will take it up, discuss with our steering committee, and as long as, like I said, we're very design thinking, few fixed elements, more flexible. If you can meet that intent, that it's co-mentored, co-training, an opportunity that makes sense, we will build it.
It seems to be like a great idea, actually, now that it
Think of
got
it.
me thinking, because I can think, so we have this eligibility where we want MDs past a certain point, but if you think about it on the ground, it's really like the technicians, for example, or I'm thinking now about our program more in the operating room, let's say, and are facing problems every day. And they're really the ones who can identify those problems. I very much like that idea.
So
to expand or
yeah, if you have concrete examples, and we'll
that's a great idea.
Take it and discuss at the mentor level too.
Yeah.
And the final question, at least online, might be, go along with that. Sounds like because of these constraints, are there any opportunities for residents currently in training to get involved in a less formal way?
That's something we have been discussing.
Yeah, so you have to think enterprise-wide. You have to think organizationally. And medical school is a highly structured and competitive educational path, as I'm sure both our fellows will speak to it. And remember, we're being innovative, but we really don't want to be disruptive to a lot of our programs that run on NIH funding, that have a lot of long cycle periods. And so we're very thoughtful about disrupting early residency. Also from our academic executive council and research leadership, there was a thought process earlier when 2 years ago or 3 years ago when I was part of those meetings to say, we do want people to complete medical school and residency because when you're looking for clinical insights, that's like probably the minimum that you want our people not to get distracted, to be able to do before they start going horizontal. And you have to go deep. It doesn't mean it may not be right for some particular individuals, some particular opportunities, but that, as we were creating a program that was scalable, we had to put some guardrails, and it came from that philosophy. Don't want to disrupt very structured residency. They hardly get any sleep. Want to make sure we're not putting more distractions there, and is it really a value add for the fellow and for the educational timing?
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
So I thought about this quite a bit, and definitely intern year, it's no out of the question. And second year, same thing. But third year, there are usually these elective blocks. So I think even, I can't speak for the residency program, but I know I've been talking to the leadership there, and there's a lot of considerations about how we can make 2-week rotations that will kind of fit both needs. Because we could do a research elective, so why can't we do a research elective in industry? Right. I mean, I don't know like big picture wise, but
agreed.
I think there are opportunities there in the third year, but not too early, like you said, because it wouldn't make sense.
And totally, our goal of this program and having a steering committee like Harry and Paul is really to evolve, learn. We're learning ourselves, and we're trying to make sure we are adding value to the organization, to the fellow, to our industry partners, and yet not disrupting anybody's own. I know IP well, took care of that, but there's a lot of other pieces, eligibility, operational, that we are very happy to evolve, and this is exactly why we like this dialogue, to say, what do our partners and others who are going to be part of the program think, and we're very happy under that umbrella to David will follow up with you and see, and then talk to. So the way it works, we have program directors for the different residence programs and fellowship programs. Maybe we can bring it up with them. There's certain compliance constraints in academic medical centers and medical schools, and those are the nationally based guidelines, which say, especially since the funding comes from industry, it might put some compliance and conflicts for the clinicals at a very higher bar. For PhDs, that bar is a little different, but in an academic system. So we do have some compliance considerations to go through, and that was one of the reasons where we started, where everything was going to be easy to do. And 0, 0, 0, like it was like perfect timing. Definitely some of us will hang out a little bit. Carrie and I will. So if you have any questions, please come let us know. If you want to partner with us, we'd be delighted please come talk to us.
I just one final
Yes,
thing.
please.
You know, I think in the beginning when we started this, there were a lot of people who said this couldn't be done for all kinds of reasons. The money, the IP, and everything. So I really want to thank Carrie and Seema for their tremendous work at getting this. Now, and also the pioneer companies who took a risk in coming in. Now a whole bunch of people want to come in on this. So thank you to Carrie and Seema and our partners.
Indeed.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Good job.
Not on those